Our City podcast, where we have candid conversations on today's topics to help connect our community. I am super excited about this episode and really this series, honestly. And Jeswin's on with me, my fellow brother. And we've been having this Connectors series where we talk to wonderful people in our community and we get to connect with them. And I'm so happy I get to connect with you, Jeswin, because we don't live in the same state anymore. I miss seeing your face in person. But how are you doing? How's life treating you?
Good. I was gonna say, when you started restoring our city, you had the city you had in mind was actually Chicago. Now that you're in Dallas, I don't know if our name still applies.
It's a suburb. I feel like Dallas is a suburb, right? No, I'm just kidding. Offend our audience.
Different ministry.
But not too far away from Dallas, Texas, where I am, is Houston, Texas. And I am so excited that we get to connect with Nathan John from the one and only Houston. Nathan, how are you, man? We are so excited to have you on. How's it going?
Gosh, man, I am so happy to be here. When you were doing the intro, I was just smiling because it's like something I've only seen on the phone screens, but now I'm actually here doing it with you guys. So I'm pumped. I'm excited to be hanging out with you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I'm so self-conscious now. It's like, I thought you only listened to us, but you're actually watching us. Added pressure. But, Nathan, I want you to do your introduction, but, there's a great Substack article. I think we're going to link it out and share because I think it really speaks to your story. And I know you're the founder of Houston Magnify, which is really awesome because, the sentence in the Substack, and that's the reason I bring it up, because I love how it describes Houston Magnify, a local South Asian-led multicultural initiative that focuses on gathering Christians across Houston to magnify Jesus. Very clear in its purpose. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just the quick blurb and where you're from, obviously. I'd love to have our audience get to know you.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Nathan John. I am from Houston, Texas, born and raised. I love this city so much. But that wasn't always the case when I was in the beginning of my college career. Around my senior year of high school is when I was just at a crossroads in my life of whether I wanted to go to Austin, Texas or Houston. I really wanted to go to Austin, but the door just kept getting closed. And that was around the same time that the Lord was really revealing himself to me. And I had made the decision that whatever I do from here forward, I'm just going to follow him 100% in everything that I do. So senior year of high school is when I really decided I'm going to follow Jesus 100%, even if it looks like staying in Houston. So since then, I've just been hanging out with and meeting so many different people here, finding so many different opportunities to just grow. And the Lord has really taken me on a really fun adventure these past 4 years throughout college. And now I work as a business consultant for Deloitte, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy my job. And so, now the Lord kind of has me in this in-between of marketplace and ministry and seeing how the two worlds can really inform each other to create something beautiful and unique. Just honestly, just hanging out and growing trying to just see what the Lord wants. But yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. That's a great place to be. And I feel like we're all between the marketplace and ministry in, all of our contexts. But before we even jump into, the rest of our questions for you, where does the love for Houston come from? I feel like we're three passionate guys about our city. So where did you finally say, hey, man, I love Houston? What is it about Houston? All we know is it's the second Malu promised land after Dallas, and it's a little bit more tropical. So yeah, what is it about that city that you love?
Okay, so here's my controversial opinion. It's not the second, it's the first. Okay, I'll gladly offend you. But okay, so the love for it is really two things. Okay, so for me personally, it's two things. The first is the food. Okay, the food here is incredible. And the reason the food is so amazing is because of number two, the diversity. This is the most diverse city in the US. And so all the ethnic cultures are here. And that means we're getting all the traditional food here. Last time I checked, Dallas doesn't have an Agas. Dallas doesn't have a Maine. Dallas doesn't have Yo-Yo's hot dog. They don't have a lot of different things here. Well, yeah, the food and the diversity is amazing here. The real reason, though, the spiritual resonance side of it is really because my love from Houston really comes from learning to love where the Lord has placed you on purpose. I think it's really easy to look around you and be upset and be frustrated and have so many different human emotions. But I think when you start to ask the question of hey, why am I here? What was the point of you putting me here? Then you slowly start to see things through the lens that God wants you to see it through. And all of a sudden, like your heart becomes softer. You suddenly like feel a burden for the people. You suddenly like the smallest things become very sentimental, and very meaningful. And you learn to more deeply appreciate it, not just because of the diversity or the food, but also because of the provision of the Lord that he's proven. So yeah, that's three main reasons why I love it.
Man, that's exactly how I feel about Chicago. But Joey, after that roast, I don't know. Do you feel the same way about Dallas? Are you learning to
Oh,
appreciate
please,
it?
no, no, not at all. I mean, I think the Lord needs to do some work in my heart. But you know what? I love that because before, yeah, honestly, Nathan, before you're even on this episode, before we even connected, I came across your Instagram, and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. What this young man is doing in Houston, and what really resonated with me from the bottom of my heart is how you address your city. And so the way you talk about your city, and of course, we're called Restoring Our City. And one of the reasons is because we had this passion about Chicago. And I can go on a soliloquy about Chicago and how much I love it. But the way you describe loving where you're from because God placed you there, and maybe that's a controversial opinion because we grow up, especially in South Asian cultures, hey, go on missions and go overseas. My younger brother went overseas and studied in India. And I always, am I just meant to be a missionary? But what about here? What about my people here, like around me, caring about our communities, caring about our city? I absolutely love that. There's no question in there. It's just, I love that, the fact that you care about it. And so um, maybe that really brings me to the burden part of it, right? Like what burdens you about Houston? What kind of disrupts your heart to do something about it?
Yeah. Well, I don't think so. It's like a combination of burden and excitement. So the reason why I said, let me start with excitement. I think the reason why is because what I've seen in Houston, even outside of the South Asian demographic, just Gen Z totally, um, is that there's this openness and curiosity towards spirituality and even Jesus. So for me, it's like, man, there's so much like opportunity here to really like plant seeds and water seeds and even harvest seeds because the people here are ready. The people here are curious. So it's like a weird type of energy that people have here of just like wanting to go deeper with the Lord. And even if they're not Christian, they're still spiritually very open. And so to me, it's like, man, this is such opportunity. Like it's a lot of opportunity to really spread the Lord's name here. And then the second reason as to the second part, which is burden. I think it really comes from like Houston has something that a lot of other cities, aside from Dallas, like a lot of other cities don't really have. And that's such a vast South Asian demographic here. And one of the largest, I think, in the US. And because of that, like there's almost like this burden of like, okay, if this is here, what does it look like what does the Lord want to do with this? Because there's a clear reason why he brought everyone here in Houston, right? What does he want to do? How does it look like to connect all these different like worlds together? Maybe it looks like doing something interdenominational. Maybe it looks like doing something interchurch, or maybe it just looks like being like, hey, our common denominator is that we love our city. Where does Jesus meet us in that? And yeah, so it's just like this interesting, I don't know. I don't know. It's just fertile ground for something new.
Yeah.
So my excitement really also comes from what Houston could and will be like maybe 5 years from now.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Almost like a look into the future and kind of placing yourself on the timeline of where God has you right now. But Nathan, you kind of touched on two aspects. One is like a general openness amongst the people for spiritual conversation. And then the second is the specifics of having the South Asian community in and amongst your heart as well. So when it comes to community in both of those contexts, right? I guess with the first one, it seems a little bit more broad in general. So how do you sort of form community through sort of a open seeking community or a group of people? And then secondly, within and amongst the South Asians there, what are some of your observations of community? Do you feel like it's been great and healthy? Do you feel like there's some work to do? What exactly is going on down in Houston?
Yeah. So I love that first question. And this is something I'm still pondering. And like, this is something I'm still trying to figure out. But just to contribute to the conversation that I think a lot of us are trying to define, how I would define community just as a, blanket definition is a group of people that are bonding over one thing.
Hmm.
So the way that I would define at least the type of community that I'm interested in is a group of people that are around who Jesus is. Like, the thing that they're bonding over is Jesus himself. Like, Jesus is at the center, and then we're all like kind of around it. That's community, is where Jesus is at the center, and whatever effects we see from relationship with Jesus, like it goes from being very vertical to very horizontal. Like, whatever happens in the vertical affects the horizontal. So all of a sudden, like taking it deeper, like taking it into a sharper definition in the Christian lens would be like, all of a sudden now, because of my walk with Jesus, I'm suddenly opening up and confessing to my brothers. I'm suddenly, just being real about like how I've been feeling discouraged about things, or I'm suddenly being encouraged. I'm suddenly encouraging. I'm suddenly repenting. I'm suddenly growing. That is what I would call like edification. Like, I'm suddenly being edified and I'm edifying my brothers and sisters. So that's how I've been like defining it, is like a group of people that just care about Jesus. And so how this comes into the South Asian lens is like, hey, this is not about, we're not a community, at least for Magnify, like we're not a community around denomination. We're not even a community around Houston. We're a community around Jesus, and we so happen to be in Houston. And we love Houston so much, but we love Jesus even more. And so it's like, how do we take these two burdens that we have and just merge them together? So that's one thing. But yeah, like that's how I would put it. I don't know if that's a good
Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And I think I love that ideal state. Like, this is what we strive to be, right? So you've obviously doing this for a little bit, and you probably experienced the relationships and the community coming together, but where does that break down? Where have you seen community? Because I know a lot of people love to form community and organize around community, but where's the breakdown? Where's the disconnect that you've seen amongst people, if it's a characteristic trait or experience? Well, what do you think it is?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I think the way where it breaks down is one, and I really don't mean to sound like pastoral or like preachy or churchy, but I think this is just the truth, is that it comes from misunderstandings of who God is. That's the first thing, is like, we're not able to identify who his character actually is. So if we see that God is very loving, but we're not being loving to those that are around us, that also stems from not fully grasping and understanding and allowing to resonate in our hearts that God is loving. Or if we see that God is holy, but yet in our circles, we're being completely unholy. Like, that is also stemming from not a full grasp and understanding of who the Lord is and how we should be like literally modeling that. So
Yeah.
where the first breakdown is, a lot of people just have misunderstandings of who God is. Maybe they do know and they just don't care. Or what I've seen a lot in Houston is that they genuinely don't know. And so with Magnify, like, something I've been realizing from a lot of the feedback that we're getting is like, there's this hunger and thirst and curiosity for more like theology, like of like, what does this actually mean? Like, if I were to hold a Bible, what is the pure gold in here? And we have to show them like the whole thing is pure gold. Like, all of it is really important. Another thing that I would say is like stemming from that. Gossip is a really big thing in the South Asian community, of like, I'm gonna talk about this person's problem over here. Like, I'm gonna tell you that I'm praying for you. I'm gonna tell you whatever, this, that, and the third, but there's like probably 50 iterations of what you just said behind my back. So that's another thing, is like this whole thing of like, hey, if someone comes to you about something and they're genuinely trying to confide, or they're just saying like what's going on in their life, maybe that's not for you to take to 50 other people. Maybe that's for you to like take to the Lord, and then also see how you can like encourage them somehow. And so because we have this pre-existing motion, or this pre-existing culture of gossip, it prevents things like, it honestly prevents us from growing in the way that I think scripture calls us to grow. It prevents us from growing in community. Like, it prevents us from confessing because we're afraid of how people are going to view us. It prevents us from holding each other accountable because we're afraid of like, oh man, what if they like try to pull a fast one on me or something like that? I don't know. There's so many different like iterations of it. So who God is, gossip, and how that can affect like confession and stuff. And then a third one that I'd say too, which is actually pretty interesting, is I would say I'm gonna title it like inter fellowship, as in like intergenerational fellowship, and then also like inter church fellowship. At least here in the South, a lot of people like label themselves by what denomination they are or what church they go to. And that's great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But I think because of that, we stay in our own circles. So there's no like inner circle mingling that happens. So it's like, oh, this person's literally like, oh, this person's Catholic, so I'm not gonna like hang out with them. Or like, oh, this person's Penty, so I'm not gonna hang out with them. When it's like, hold on, what? Like, that's not how we should be like functioning. And then this other thing of like intergenerational fellowship, which is something I've been really trying to push with Magnify, of like, look, we need our chachas and chechis. We also need our uncles and aunties. Heck, we even need the uppaches and ummachis to give us advice and like to pour into us and help us like stand on their shoulders, as well as they need us to soften their hearts. They need a youthful energy. They need like Joshua's that will come with like a fresh perspective and a different kind of energy of like, yeah, let's go take over that hill, or like, yo, let's go take over this, or let's go take over that. So yeah, I think there's like a definitely like a co-sharpening that happens when you allow yourself to intermingle with like different circles and stuff. So
Yeah, I love that.
sorry, sum up everything I just said. It's not understanding who God is, gossip, and that keeping us from everything, and then also interfellowship.
I was just gonna say, right when you started talking about gossip, I could hear all the aunties turning off our podcast right now. It's like, oh man, can't do that anymore. Man, I love that. Jessamine, I know you have something brewing in your head.
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking to Nathan, I mean, you laid the problems out so clearly, but it seems like such a broad and large thing to tackle, right? There's part of it, which is how do we enable people to see God? And then it's surprising on the second hand when people who have been church do not see who he is because of the second thing you brought up, which is the culture, right? Instead of having an ideal state where we're truly centered around who Christ is, we seem to have these cultural attributes that might center us around something else, maybe something we grew, born and brought up with, maybe something generational, something cultural that causes us to do some of these honor shame type gossip related things. And then finally, the generational divide, which is evident across the states, if not probably across the globe, of different generations seeing things differently and really having that second cultural effect. So I guess the question to sort of come up with here is, how do you sort of think about effectively tackling some of these areas? I know it's a very broad thing you might be brewing with, but maybe take one of those areas and say, hey, this is how you personally and even Houston Magnify seeks to maybe, make some progress in these areas. And then if you could speak to any sort of testimonies or signs of progress that you've seen, that would be great to hear as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to preface, I think what you say is so true. And one thing I say in response to that is like, the truth is, no matter how great of a leader you are, no matter how connected you are, no matter what your ethnic identity is, no matter what city you are, one person doesn't change the problem, right? Like the reality is like, it's probably not even going to really change, but as in like, you're not going to change everybody, but you can find one or two people that you're friends with, and you can decide to be the catalytic effect for those two people. And then from there, they go and affect two other people and two other people and two other people. And you have no idea who's like watching, what younger kid is watching when they like show up, and they're just like watching you from afar about how you like handle stuff or how you tackle stuff or how you carry yourself. And they decide like, I want to be like Jessamine Chachin. Like, I want to embody that when I go to work or when I hang out with my friends at school. And they slowly start to embody that as they go forward. And it just becomes this whole trickle effect of just influence. And then the Holy Spirit comes and just blesses that. And like the Lord uses that and multiplies it in all the ways that he wants to. And so the biggest thing that I think we as leaders, we as connectors, we as like people need to understand is like, we're not going to change the world like overnight, but you can change one or two people's lives by just being relational with them, and they'll have real effects on people. one of the ways that I've seen this really play out in Houston is we had a small group started by my friend Aaron Chaco. I love him so much. He's a great guy. I'm sure he's watching this. But Aaron decided he wanted to venture out and create a small group, which is three of us, including him. So 2 other people, actually. And today that small group is now 15 people. And I don't think so Aaron actually came in with this culture of like, guys, we need to be confessing. We need to be holding each other accountable. We need to be like encouraging one another. We actually need to be diving into scripture and like actually growing into the men that we want to become. And then there was like another dude who was like, I want to do the same thing. And then came in. And now it's like 15 of us. And we meet every Sunday after church. We'll pack, the coffee shop owner hates us. Like, we'll get in there and it's so loud and like, we all don't even order coffee. We're just terrible. We're very rambunctious. Okay. But the reality is though, is like, bro, any of us would like, we're showing up because what we like love it so much. And we see our personal lives like changing. And then I can confirm, like, I can say this is like all of these 15 guys have went and done, like, majority of them have actually started their own small groups, but with their communities. Like, it's really crazy. Like, and they're not even like, we all kind of happen to be like charismatic leaning. And they're creating small groups with people that aren't even like charismatic leaning. And it's so cool to see. And it goes to show like, this is proof of concept. Like, this is, like, in business, we call it the MVP, like the minimal viable product. Like, this is the MVP. This is proof that like this can work. Like, if we just start with just 2 people, you have no idea like what could happen from there. So it's really just a matter of relational influence and understanding, like, you're probably not going to change the world. You're probably not going to change your city, but you could probably change your community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's so critical because the verse that comes to mind is like when Jesus talks about the poor you will always have with you, even just from a principle standpoint. We're not meant to solve all of these huge problems, but like, what should our focus be on those relationships? You won't have me with you, right? Like the relational aspect of it. And so you just mentioned even small group and multiplying there. What are those characteristics in your friends, in your people? Because it's not everybody, right? We can't solve the entire city and expect them to be the ideal community we want it to look like. But what are those attributes of not just you, but your friends and like the connectors, the leaders? Like, what are those attributes of those people that can impact change in the community?
Absolutely, man. Like, one thing that I've seen is they are very relational. And this is something I'm trying to like get better at, honestly. But like, they just have real friendships with different people. And it's like, okay, man, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter like where you come from. It doesn't matter where your background is. Even with non-Indians, it's like, I know like in the Indian circle, we're so used to like, oh, you like, you have to stay with your own clique and then don't go past that. But it's like, no, man, just like, they're just friends with everyone in the same way that Jesus was. Like, whoever you meet, whoever you are like cool with, there's like this really cool culture of like hospitality that has really started here, and has just been really like taking off. Of like, if we see someone new, like, all of us kind of have an understanding of like, make them feel welcome, make them feel loved, and invite them out to something that we're doing in the future. Like, if we're all playing volleyball or pickleball or doing something, like, hit this person up and be like, yo, you want to come like vibe with us? Or if we're all getting lunch after church, hit this person up and be like, yo, we're pulling up to Torchy's. Do you want to come? It's something as simple as like relational, invitational, and being hospitable. That's the first thing I've seen is like I think the best way I've seen the gospel be spread, at least among my crew and among my gen, is like relational evangelism. Is like, I want to be your friend. And then because you know that I love you for you, and because you know that I'm your friend, I also want to share with you like this gospel that has changed my life. And I know that you'll respect it and treat it with delicacy because I'm your friend. And you'll also know that I'm coming from a good place because I'm your friend. So there's that's there. Another thing that I've seen too is just this spiritual yearning. And I'm not trying to hype anything up. Like, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but I think it's the truth of like, people here are very, at least, yeah, people here are very like spiritually yearning. They want more. Like, they're very curious, and it's not for like, I think the reason is for like, where's my life going? And like, who do I want to become? What is the type of man that I want to be? Et cetera, et cetera. Like how did the problems that I have, maybe I'm dealing with like mental illnesses, like maybe I'm just dealing with like relational problems. Maybe I'm not tight with my family, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, I understand that Jesus is real, but like, how does he fit in these like issues? Like, how do I get him to like really come over and take over these things? So that spiritual yearning is like also like another thing that I've seen. It's like everyone's kind of on the same like page.
Yeah, no, that's unique. I'll definitely say I don't have that same sense of the people in and among Chicago. I don't know if you have the same sense down there in Dallas, Joven, but that's definitely a unique thing that I hear about that spiritual yearning. But in relation to
Maybe
that,
I
yeah,
was just gonna say, I have the same exact thought, right? Because maybe it's cities and pockets of communities that do behave differently, and maybe it's the Bible Belt. I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's not to cut you off, Justin, but like, is it those principles of those people to still thrive in even those maybe agnostic or more hyper liberal places that may not be as receptive to the gospel? Do we feel like those attributes can still carry over? Maybe that's a question to both of you guys, just being in the spaces you're in.
Yeah, I want to like add on to that in the conversation. So I just had the privilege of going up to Asbury University up in Kentucky. That was where the outpouring happened, and it happened for like, like 2 weeks, and they were worshiping and stuff. It was really great. I went up there for a gathering. Like I thought it was a leadership development conference. It wasn't. Like it was just like probably like 40 or 50 people that came together. And these are people from all over the world. So we had like people from Australia. I met a dude my age from London, some people from China, like Asia. So we're all coming together and we're all just in this room and we're talking about what we see. And so all of them were kind of saying the same thing of like, there's suddenly this like spiritual openness that we're seeing. And then there is actually a research institute that I would love to put y'all on. I think y'all already know about it. But even the viewers too, is called Barna, Barna. So they actually came into the room and they presented like a state of the church, like analysis that they did of like, this is where the church is. This is where Gen Z is right now. And something that they presented was out of all the generations, Gen Z is actually the most like spiritually open one. So it's not that they're on the side of whether God exists or not. It's that, okay, I know there's a higher power. I know there's a God. Which one is it? And like how does he fit into my life and how will this work and which one is the truth? So what I've like been seeing from like other people and what Barna even like confirmed through their research, and they're pretty good at what they do, is that Gen Z is just more spiritually open than like other generations have been. And that's why we see a rise in stuff like like stuff like astrology, stuff like there's more stuff, but I just can't quote it off the top.
Enneagrams and all the craziness thereof.
There's like a spiritual openness to it, Yeah.
what do you think that stems from? I was also there's also the counter stats with Gen Z and looking at things such as anxiety, purposelessness. There's a book that I'm actually going through that Joby put me on called The Anxious Generation. As well, where you do see, on one side, this awakening in stats that point toward the openness. And on the flip side, you also see the other extreme of a sense of like lostness or anxiety that isn't as resilient per se as maybe some other generations. So what do you think is creating that sense of openness uniquely amongst Gen Z? And then do you see that being different? Yeah, let me just pause it there. What do you think is really causing that? They're driving that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the answer right there. Is like there is this sense of like there's a lot of like internal things that we struggle with. There's also things like existential crisis of like, why am I here? Why am I on this earth? Like, what is my purpose? I think those more abstract ideas, like we tend to like think about deeper, or not deeper, sorry. Well, we think about more frequently. And then on top of that, I think digital media actually has a huge role to play with it. I don't think enough people are saying that. Is like our generation kind of grew up with that trend, and Gen Alpha has more than us, but like we kind of grew up on that trend. And so despite being connected, we're still like disconnected, and that like there is a disconnect behind the digital world. of like, yes, this is cool. I could scroll like all day and it'll be fine. But at the end of it, like I still feel this like emptiness and like this disconnect. So it's like, okay, I know the answer is not in the digital world, and there's other things that we can go and try. We can truly understand like maybe it's just not there. And so that's why there's this openness of like, maybe there's a higher power. Maybe there's a bigger guy up in the sky that wants to like do something. I'm reminded of a quote by C.S. Lewis, and he says this, which is, if I'm paraphrasing, but like he says, like, if I desire something internally that is not on this earth, then it must be that I am made for something outside of this earth. Mm. Like if I desire a water, like there's water here, so I'll drink it. If I desire like food, there's food here, so I'll eat it. But if I desire something that this earth cannot provide me, I must come from something that is outside of this earth. I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
That is awesome. I just love that thought. And yeah, I echo, a lot of what you say, because it's ironic, because sometimes when older generations look down upon Gen Z saying, all sorts of negative things, and some of the effects of growing up, in a social media age, you can almost like write them off, but then you see the story God is writing somehow on the backside of it, which is saying there is something brewing that is far beyond what any other generation could imagine, and just reminds you that God is faithful to every generation. And it's almost looking at like, what is God doing in and amongst this current generation? Joby, I don't know if you have an add-on to that.
No, I think, Fan, even in this series, I'll just say, like, we've been talking to people and interviewing people, and, this is the 20th year that we've been doing something with Parachurch, with Rock. There are stories that I hear from people 20 years ago that I had no idea impacted them. And it was a small group, or it was like a Bible study that we did at a Panera or something. And when you started talking about Nathan, it's like, we're not going to just change the entire city or the landscape, but it's the individual relationships. But now I am a little bit older, and yes, you guys call me Chachin, but now I'm getting to see the faithfulness of God, like weaving his hand in those little relationships that we've had. And it's not to glorify anything that we've done, but that's how God is operating, because Gen Z is going to be, I love Gen Z because I've got 2 Gen Alpha kids screaming in the background, and guess who's going to impact them the most? It's Gen Z, and it's the young generation that's going to be the mentor. So I love that. And you basically summarized that whole book, Nathan, in your response, because it's literally, you can see the spikes in anxiety and depression and around when the iPhone was released, and now we're all digital. So maybe that's a segue into like what you're doing, because one of the attributes that really highlighted the ministry and what the work that's happening in Houston is to us is this physical presence. You're moving, in a world that leans digital, but like you're creating a space for people to gather when they're really glued to their phones most of the time, right? So talk to us a little bit about that and why you elected to host something and organize something that is in a physical space rather than digital.
Yeah. So real. So there is something that you just mentioned that actually really resonated with me. And that was when you said you were hearing the stories of people from 20 years ago, and it was like something super small. Maybe it was a small group or a Bible study in Panera. It was the same thing. That was actually what motivated me to start Magnify. Was I remember looking through these like old pictures on Facebook, when you go stalk your parents and you're like, hey, what's your digital footprint? Let me see, and you're just bored one day on a bathroom. But anyways, what I saw was just like this. They used to do this thing called FBS, Friday Bible Study. And there would be just so many people there, and they don't meet anymore. I think if they do, it's like a reunion that happens like once a year. But at the time, like, who are my like uppachins and ummachis now, or people that I really like revere and respect as elders, at the time, way back then, they were the ones that were hosting this FBS. And all the uncles and aunties that I'm like cool with now and I love and adore, back when they were like younger in their marriage, they were coming to FBS, and these uppachins and ummachis were the ones that were like pouring into them and like helping them. And so what would happen as a result of like FBS was like just hearing so many different testimonies of like, oh man, that like we would bring the kids, and that's where the kids like got to have friends and they get to run around and play, or like we were just going through stuff with our marriage, and like that's where like FBS really like helped us with that and helped us become like better fathers and mothers and like be better, like have a healthier marriage, or like, I was really young in my walk with Christ. And because of what this auntie did, like it helped me grow. And so it was like not a movement to like take over like the world or to take over the state of Texas. It was literally just like, how can this be a catalyst and a seed for someone's life? That's it. That's all we got to do. And what I like thought of was like, man, we don't have any spaces like that where it's like, we're not like just space where like people can come together and this can be the like modern day, like Friday Bible study type vibe. Where it's like, oh, like this is not going to take over the state of Texas or anything like that, but this will probably help you with like what you're going through in college, or like when you're doing your post grad, or like, oh, in that relationship that you have, like this will probably help you with like just those small things. And then that itself will have like a very huge like trickling effect. So to answer the question of like, why do we meet in physical ways in such a digital era, is because nothing can replace physically meeting with people. And I think we saw that like with COVID. Like, yes, for a minute, we all enjoyed being like online. And then after a while, we were like, hey, we should all probably start meeting back up in person, because like just the connection, like no matter who you are as a human, you crave community, you crave connection. And I think in the digital era, like those things shouldn't be vintage. Those things should be ours. Like it should be real. It should be present. And I think that's the novelty of it, of like, this isn't a Zoom call. This isn't a Microsoft Teams call. This is like us. Like I just drove 30 minutes across Houston to step into this coffee shop and try a vanilla latte while I talk it up with a random guy that I've never met before. And that to us is like so special, because we grew up kind of already seeing like the For You page. We know the doom scroll. We know all the different apps. I could tell you all about House Party and how all of us were like, we were intermingling circles and all that stuff, but it didn't last because it's not in person. Like I really do feel like there's something about what the Lord has made us in to be, is like we need to be like meeting in person under one roof. Like under a roof is something about a roof. Like it's just so beautiful. And so something I've been like really like contemplating about is like, how do we create more of those spaces? Like what does space curation look like in such a digital age? And how can we use digital environments to help like funnel to those physical spaces? One of the ways that we do that is literally through phone numbers, right? So we have a text messaging system that functions as your new radar. So all you got to do is text join to the number, and then the number texts you back. It'll tell you where we're meeting, how we're meeting. And it's like out of nowhere too. So you'll just get a random text like, yo, this Friday, we're pulling up at this coffee shop. We're going to do a Bible study, pull up, And so it's like, we don't even care about the social media algorithm anymore. We'll just show up on your notification list and you'll get a text, and then you just forward that to some other friends and come through, So using those like digital ways, or even on Instagram, like a lot of what we see of people coming to these physical spaces are people that were just doom scrolling on Instagram. I'm not joking.
Oh, cool.
Statistics to back that up too. And so it's like, man, how do we use digital to funnel to physical? Because Gen Z at least has that digital disconnect and they want the physical realness.
No, it's really good. And actually, before even kind of addressing that, I think I loved what you were talking about with FBX just in general. And you almost see that as a principle even throughout scripture, right? Like God has seasons of gathering people together, and then eventually they scatter, but wherever they go, they take that gospel with them, right? And you saw that with, a generation before. And now in some senses, you're seeing that again. There's this gathering of people together happening in Houston. And through that scattering, that replication, you see the impact being made in a broader sense, which is great. I guess I do want to talk a little bit more about, I think one of the tenets you talked about earlier is wanting to become more intergenerational. But at the same time, there seems to be a clear heart and desire to see something happen in and amongst Gen Z, whether it be like the methods and the curations of spaces and whatnot. So kind of talk maybe not just between the intergenerational tension, but also how do you sort of navigate even theological differences, some of the interdenominational components of this. How do you sort of meld together this amalgamation of different theologies, different denominations, different generations, but bring them under one roof, like you said?
Yeah, it's a heavy question. So I think one thing with the Magnify spaces, and when I say spaces, I'm talking about our pop-ups, I'm talking about our worship nights, like all that stuff. With the Magnify spaces, like they're meant to be a common ground. Like that's the point. Because I think something like Gen Z has to learn is how do we be more open armed to people that are older than us? Because like, how do we come up to them and be like, no, I actually want you like in my life. I actually want your guidance. I actually do want to hear about your stories. Like, I actually do want to hear about what you went through. And so that's like, these spaces are meant to really encourage Gen Z of like, one thing that, I'm saying in an upcoming promo video is like, I said like, oh, bring your mom. Like, actually, like for real, but like, as for real, it's like, bring your mom, bring your amachi, bring your apachin, like, bring your dad, like, bring whoever you want. And then in a previous promo video, I made a promo video just for the older generation saying like, hey, like, you're not too old or too young to be coming to this, so please come. And the response from that was like, hey, like a lot of older people came up to me and said like, I felt really seen. Like, I really appreciate you doing that. Because this whole time I thought it was for younger people and I didn't want to overstep, but it's like, you're not overstepping if we invite you. So it's like, how do we be more like, the Magnify spaces are meant to be more invitational, and be like, hey, come through. And then also, something too that I saw from the Magnify spaces was the older generation realizing like, hey, this younger generation is up to stuff. We should come up behind them and support them. And so what does that actually look like? I started hearing about how, these uncles and aunties will have their own like morning prayer calls. They're like at 6 a.m., like going crazy, right? And you just like waking up. Man, like they started praying for like our generation because of those experiences. They're like, oh, we see that this generation is waking up. We see that this generation is, trying to like do this and that and this. Let's pray for them. And so it's like all of a sudden everybody's kids are on the prayer request list and like we're praying for them. And like I've had the privilege of having a lot of uncles and aunties and chachas and chechis like be like, Monet, like whatever you want, like we'll come and support you with this and stuff. And so, and my biggest thing is like, hey, we don't really want, we don't want your finances or anything like that. We literally just want you to show up, like just be present with us. And like, also like, we just want to hear about like what is going on in your life and like what you had to go through and how that could help us with what we're going through. So in creating these spaces, it's showing both parties, like the younger party and the older party, that like, hey, there's actually room for us to be united despite whatever despite whatever we may be already thinking, that may not be the case. So it's more just a proof of concept. It's like, hey, it can actually work when we bring all these generations together, and there could actually be like a pretty good response that comes out of it.
Let me ask a follow-up to that really quickly. Yeah. Why do you think it's happening in the Magnify space and not within a church? Because the church is intergenerational, but you see the disconnection. You're thinking about it as you were talking, because that seems to be the problem, or at least the complaint that you really see, not just amongst Gen Z, but even our generations, right? Like Joby and I growing up in church, there's always this concept of like, the older generation doesn't understand us. And the second thing that I was thinking about is we don't really have space to almost change the culture of that older generational model. But at the same time, whenever, especially back in the day, Joby, I know you could talk about rock, even if you threw an invitation out there was more opposition than there was collaboration. So I don't know if you want to dive into that on this podcast, or if this is going to go from restoring to destroying our cities.
No, not destroying. And I think I love Doc. I think, I love the posture, first of all, of embracing the older generation, because there's always been this like, get off my lawn attitude from the older generation to the younger generation, no matter what time period in history you look at, right? And I think it really stems from a fear of losing your people, right? You're going to start a small group. That means you're going to start a church and you're going to leave my church. Why do you want to start something? Why do you want to go meet with just your people? Why can't you do it in-house? I mean, even from church to church, from denomination to denomination, why we don't get together? Because we don't want to lose anybody. And sometimes it's a numbers game, and sometimes it's really a selfish attitude and not embracing differences and true community of like what God intended, right? So I think there's a fear there, but there's also this, wrestling, especially with the passions of your heart and what God intended the church to be. And I've always wrestled with that doing parachurch ministry, right? Like, well, why can't you do the small group as part of a church? Well, because there's red tape for lack of a better term, right? To get something off the ground, speed to market almost, right? Some of those concepts. But yeah, I don't know, Nathan, like, what do you think about that in terms of
Yeah.
the wrestling?
Before you jump in, Nathan, actually, Joby, as you were talking, and I wonder if this is just the rightness of the time, right? You were talking about the fear of losing people that used to persist before, but the reality is there's a lot of millennials and other generations that have been lost, right? Like we have a mission field that exists in amongst some of that generation. So when you go to a local church now, you see this massive generational gap. Maybe there's an attitude shift now that says, if you hold on too tightly, you are going to lose it all. And you've already seen the lots happening. Maybe now is the time that there is an attitude shift more broadly to enable this kind of a movement. Sorry, Nathan, I don't want to jump in and take your thunder there, but that was just a thought that was jumping into my mind.
Yeah, no, I love this conversation. Yeah, just to echo what you guys have already said, I think the harsh reality is that the reason we don't see intergenerational fellowship in the church is because of a lack of understanding of the gospel. I think that's just, like, call it what it is. That's just the end of the day. That's what it is. Like, there is a part of the gospel that our hearts are becoming hardened to because we're not going to follow the gospel there. We're going to probably follow culture. And it's like, that's a really controversial thing to say, and it would offend some people that are listening, or maybe some uncles and aunties, but that's also the truth of, like, the gospel is intergenerational. Like, the gospel is about, like, heaven is going to be looking like everybody's up there. And one thing that Paul talks about a lot is the edification of the church. Edification of the church happens when those that are strong fill in the gap for those that are weak. And so by those that are strong, it means they've been through some stuff. They've seen some stuff. They've gone through a lot. And they want to be able to use that wisdom and those battle scars and that discernment that they have from their age and be able to communicate that to the younger generation. So that first part of being able to honestly see that, like, hey, you are meant to stand in the gap for the weak, like for the younger. That part is sometimes missing. Or sometimes that part is there. And the problem is on the Gen Z side is that they think, like, oh, I don't want to hang out with these gray heads. Like, these people don't get it. Like, they're not living in 2025. They grew up in the whenevers, like the 60s, the 70s, the 50s even. Like, they don't understand anything. But it's like, hold on. Like, they may not understand what we're going through today, but at the end of the day, like, they still understand what it means to something as simple as, like, what does it mean to honor God in your career? You really think that it's specific to 2025? No, they were doing that way back then. And you know what? It was 10 times harder back then because God wasn't an aesthetic. That was something that people were getting actually persecuted for. And they, in America, like, that's a big deal. So it's like, it looks like a willingness it has to be a willingness on both sides. And sometimes the reality is either one side or both sides are not realizing what the scriptures call us to do and how intergenerational the Lord is calling us to be.
Yeah. And even when you were talking about, previously with some of the spaces just for giving an older generation the time to tell, like, those stories. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of us don't really know our older generational stories, and it's a generation we're losing very quickly nowadays. And it's something that we have to capture. And maybe it's just a lack of knowledge, even on my part, of those that came before me, because maybe we don't necessarily have that space, or we never, cultivated that space to enable those stories to really come forward. We kind of, work, we go to church, we do the normal prayer meeting thing, and we come home. But really those stories are the ones that we're missing, that we have to almost bring out in some of these spaces, because again, like, it helps edify us for sure. And then also just, the thought of losing it very quickly is now sort of resonating with me, because those are gone. They're gone.
Yeah. And another thing too, we talked about this up in Asbury. And this was like, hey, one thing we were saying is, like, hey, we don't want to, like, we use the word glaze. Like, we don't want to, like, overhype Gen Z too much. And something that we were talking about is, like, there's also a culture of honor that is missing from Gen Z that they need to learn, which is, like, how to honor those that came before you and honor those that are older than you. Like, yes, they may not be living in the 2025 world and have a TikTok account and understand what all these things are, but we still honor, like, them. And we go out of our way to honor them because we're honoring how the Lord has moved in their life and how it affected us. So I think that is another thing to just add into the conversation, is like, we also need to figure out, like, we need to learn better and do better about honoring like people. One of the ways that I try to do that, how do we do it realistically? So at the worship night that we did, we had chairs and then we had people sitting on the ground. And when I got up on stage, I saw that there were like some uncles and aunties like sitting on the ground or standing in the back. And then there was some like high school, like college age, like kids just sitting on the chairs. And something I said on the mic was like, hey, if you're sitting in a chair, do you mind just, and you're under the age of like being able to sit on the ground, like, can you just get off the chair and come sit on the ground, and let's leave those chairs for some of our older people that are not able to sit on the ground. And just seeing like, bro, just something about hearing the rustling of like people getting up and like the chairs like scooting back and like people getting resettled and sitting back down. And I was like, yeah, we need to be hearing that sound more of like people like moving out the way to honor like the older people. Like, yes, we may not see eye to eye. Maybe we're clashing heads sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'm going to get up off my chair and give it to you because I still honor you and respect you.
Man, that first, it takes me back to prayer meetings back in the that's immediately where my mind went when you were talking about that, Nathan. And then the second thing is, I feel like an entire podcast, we could almost run it back and just talk about what does honor even mean, because that is a massive topic.
Yeah.
In and of itself. Joby, I don't know where your mind was at.
I was thinking about like, when you do the old school prayer meetings and it's crowded in the living room and there's nowhere to sit, but then you get the upperchin who waltzes in, and you get the youth who go grab a chair from the kitchen table and put it out there. And I love that picture that you painted of honor. Like, how do we physically display honor? And maybe just kind of understanding there's two things that you kind of really shared there about intergenerational connections is we can learn from each other. It's a two-way street. And I think honoring the older generation, but also the older generation learning from you and Gen Z. And I think one thing that really stuck out to me is the creativity that Gen Z displays in these spaces, right? Like, what is it about the creative nature of what you do that you're tapping into something that's really unique to Gen Z? Like, how have you used some of those creative decisions to create the space that is welcome for all?
Yeah. So creativity helps so much in taking non-traditional approaches, which is what Gen Z loves. And actually, I think what just people needs, like not just Gen Z, I think people need just non-traditional approaches. So creativity is not just, I can cook up a really good graphic and post it on Instagram. Creativity is not just, hey, I'm going to take a really cool video highlight and post it on the Instagram story, tag everyone in it and have them repost it. That's not creativity. I mean, yes, that takes creativity, but that's not just creativity. Creativity is when you think outside of the box and when you create spaces, when you do things that are more like abstract. And everybody has this like ability to do this because we are created by a God that creates and has given us that creation ability. So it looks like to me right now, something I've really been pondering about, and I'm working with another dude who started up a really huge worship movement here in Houston, is how do we curate those spaces? Like, it's not just like a superficial way to put it is like, how do we make the vibe? But that's not it. It's not it. Sure. It's like when I step into this room, like how should the room be curated? Like, and this whole curation is just worship unto the Lord. So like, it's not just like turning on a fog machine. That's not it. Like, it's more of just like, what is the posture we take and how is that posture expressed in the shirt design or the worship set or how the hospitality team goes about things. It's like taking this very abstract idea and finding physical ways to embody that abstract. So one way is we did it through the hospitality team. So we have so many different teams. Each team has like leads on them. So I spoke with the leads and I was like, hey, for the hospitality team, like when the person walks in, like our hospitality team should be in such a way that like we're able to take them all the way to like a seat, or we're able to utilize social mobility of like, we know everybody who's in this room. So it's like, I'm going to get to know you a little bit, and then I'm going to find a way to get you introduced to this person over here because y'all bond over the same thing. Like that when you zoom out and look at that, that's creativity of like, hey, there's this abstract feeling we have that we want to do of like everybody come into the throne room, like everybody come to the center, and like, how do we get the hospitality people, like the doorkeeper that is mentioned in like in scripture. I think it's like Psalms. It talks about like, I would rather be a doorkeeper. It's like, okay, what does that look like? Like, what does it look like to be a doorkeeper? What do you think the illustration behind that psalm probably was? Or it's like, how do we get this room to feel like a throne room? I know everyone's doing it now, but it was like, instead of just having the typical like stage layout and then a rectangular like crowd, what if we just made it like free for all, where it's just like, there's no stage, like it's just sound, and you have no idea, you probably can't even see who's making the sound, but it's just like, just be in the room, like, and maybe it looks like, why don't we just keep them at the center and then everybody just come around, because that's how the throne room is modeled, of like, he's at the center and everybody else is around him. Or another way that it could look like is like, hey, one thing that we want to like push with Magnify is like, you embrace your cultural identity, but you also embrace the way you were raised. So for a lot of us, for me specifically, is like, I know I am like Christian. I know I'm Indian. I know I'm all these things, but I also don't want to take away from the fact that like, I love like Houston. I love this. I love that. I love this. So it's like, okay, well, how do we blend those two worlds together to show like you can be in the like, you can embrace both worlds because that's who God created you to be. And it's like, okay, how do we communicate that in the tote bags? Okay, let's design the tote bags like this, or like, let's design the shirt like that. And then even of like structure, I think at least the way my brain functions is like, I love structure, and I just love like creating different like structures. It's like a little puzzle piece. I don't know. But even with structure and like how that works, like how can we be creative with that? And so it's like the way we structure our teams is like, there's two leaders. There's an external leader and there's an internal leader. So the internal leader is like someone who's fire at leading, but they don't want a microphone presence. And the external leader is someone who's fire at leading, but they want a microphone presence, or they have a microphone presence. And it's like, how do we get these two people to work together, of like the person who doesn't want the microphone presence and the person who has a microphone presence. And when you put them two together, you get this like weird synergy. And it's like, how do we communicate? How do we get that synergy, extract it, and bring it to the team of like, yes, be out there, but don't make this all about you, you know? And it's like, how do we get both worlds communicated in just how this team is like structured? I don't know. I could go on for days about this. Yeah, but
Man, there's so much. I mean, just the ideas that are marinating in all of our minds, and probably the minds of our listeners. As you were just talking about that, I mean, immediately I was just thinking about, you know, in the Old Testament, when it came to, I think, the tabernacle, right? I think there was Bezalel that was mentioned, and it says, "Hey, I have given this guy the Holy Spirit." And what's it for? It's for the artistic designs that he's going to be making for, you know, the temple. And that's exactly where my mind was going as you were talking there.
yeah,
Nathan, just amazing to kind of hear your heart and even how to leverage that creative aspect in everything, right? From the smallest detail down to the relational aspects. It's incredible to see. I was going to say, I know we're coming up on time, but man, I feel like we're just getting into our stride and like the meat of this conversation. So I'd hate to show up and
Let's go 3 hours and yeah, let's go.
part two, right? Like we'll definitely have to run it back. But before that, Nathan, if there's like any encouragement that you can give to someone, maybe that's listening in a different city that says, hey man, I got a passion for my city here. Not Chicago, not Houston, somewhere else, you know, somewhere random, somewhere rural. Let's just imagine that person sitting there that says, I don't think I can do this, right? Like, yeah, you know what, but you're Nathan. I can't do this by myself sitting out here. What would you almost like say to that person? Just say, hey, here's some encouragement to go do something and trust that the Lord is going to take care of it.
yeah. I mean, I would say first, it's like, if the Lord can raise people up from the dead, he can definitely use you to go like restore your city. No pun intended. So like, there's nothing impossible for the Lord. There's nothing too hard for the Lord. He is the one that creates our mouths and our tongues and our entire being. And so he is free to use it however he wants. So it's not really about what you can do. It's just about what you can do through God, like, and how God is going to use you. So I would say, like, if you're feeling discouraged about, like, I don't know, man, maybe it's not me, like, maybe it's, you know what, it probably is you. And honestly, I thought the same thing for 6 months before I started Magnify. And what I realized was, like, it's not about you, it's about God and the glory that he gets. And he's choosing you to be a vessel to do that. If anything, we should be privileged and honored and ready. And yes, there are feelings that are going to come with that, but the Lord already knows that, the same way he did with Moses. When Moses was like, but I have a stutter. And then the Lord dropped the craziest bar on him and then used him for the rest of Exodus for his glory. So that the same thing that can happen. If I could give like quick, like pieces of advice to someone that wants to start their own ministry, aside from that, is also don't minister from a place of unhealed trauma. I think that's something that a lot of us do, is like, hey, I don't like my church. I really am tired of them. I hate them, whatever, this, that, and the third. So I'm going to start up this yada, yada, so that it could like be our own thing. And like, yeah, we're going to be our thing now. Like, take that. Like, don't do that. Like, we should always be operating out of the fullness of Christ and not the fullness of ourselves. So really, like, before you step into anything, and yes, it's exciting and yes, it's awesome, take a minute to take personal audit and inventory. Do you have any unhealed trauma that you have not given to the Lord? Or do you need to confess some stuff to some people and just say like, hey, I'm like frustrated about this and that, and get wise counsel from people. The second thing that I would say is, and I'll end it here for sake of time, this is the most important thing. If you forget everything that I say in this podcast, please remember this one thing, which is there's a difference between being gospel centric and gospel adjacent. And we want to be gospel centric. Like, everything we do, the gospel is the center of. It's not like, oh, community and the gospel. It's no, the gospel and a result of that is the community. Like, Jesus is the cause and everything else is the effect. It's not, oh, community is the cause and Jesus is the effect. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. So I would say, like, make sure in the way we structure our leadership teams and the way that we do things and the way that we present ourselves, carry ourselves, and the way that we grow what we have, we're making sure that, this is gospel centric, and it's obvious that it's gospel centric, and it is not gospel adjacent. Like, oh yeah, it's this and the gospel, because Paul actually warns us against that in Colossians. He says, you don't need to add anything onto Christ. Christ is sufficient by himself. He has the full Godhead dwelling in him bodily. He does not need anything else. So for us, I think in the way that we create and model and really steward, we need to understand that, like, to be gospel centric, not just gospel adjacent. And keep listening to Restoring Our City, because they'll probably help you get more insight into stuff.
I want to plug Houston Magnify. Go follow them on Instagram. Nathan, there's so much we want to share. There's lack of time, but when you just mentioned that, when we started this way back when, one of my old mentors told me this crazy phrase, and he said, do you know what it means to have the functional centrality of the gospel? And I was like, what the heck are you talking about? And that just started a journey. And it's not the ministries, right? It's not the things that we start. It's literally the work of Christ in us and through us. And that's why we wanted to have you on, because we can see the gospel working in Houston. And that's our desire, to see the gospel working in the cities across this country and beyond, right? And so that's why we wanted to have you on here. And that's why we want to hear the stories 20 years from now when we're Oppichans, and some person's going to come up to you. And honestly, I know it's going to happen, right? Someone's going to come up to you, Nathan, and say, hey, I heard the gospel. I saw Jesus through this. They might not remember any of the events and the ministries and the things that we do, but they see Jesus more. So that's why we wanted to have you on, because you're a connector and you're connecting people to Jesus. And like so many people that we've interviewed already, I hope people listening to this can see Jesus through this, right? And like see through these conversations and these events. So check out Houston Magnify. Check them out on Instagram. Nathan, I'm glad that this is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning of a relationship, and for our communities. And so excited for everything that you're doing, and not just you, but the Houston community, and our cities beyond. So thank you again. We really appreciate you spending some time with us, and can't wait to put this out. And thank you to all of our listeners. Please check them out, and we look forward to connecting with you guys soon.